So give a round of applause to Simon.
So our projection is a strange shape, but that's all right. So the work that I've been doing since 2008 has been using this name, Circa 69. To give a little bit of background, before that I was working under the name Junk TV. I ran a punk film outfit in the UK. So when film equipment first became accessible to people who weren't rich like me, we started making films on like VHS cameras and so on, and we made something like 1,000 films in that way, making films that so quickly and for very specific locations that we were able to turn the film experience into an immersive experience, because the actors would point out and go, you know, you sitting in the red chair, look under your chair, pull out, and there were interactions between the screen and what was going on in the room. So once I realized that I was making immersive stuff, I started a new company to really embrace this, which was Circa 69. If you look me up on Wikipedia, you'll see that I'm listed as a transmedia artist, which is horrible. But what it really means is that I'm working across lots of different mediums. Now, this wasn't planned. Like at the beginning, I was doing music, electronic music. I was in hardcore bands. I was making films. I was making paintings. I was just a busy guy who didn't really know what he wanted to do, but he kind of wanted to do everything. But as this sort of immersive practice emerged, I realized I could do everything and turn each element into different parts of the story. That's basically where we start off with Circa 69. And I'm going to just recap the last, let's say, 15 years, not about me, but about the scene. And particularly because my work's been showing in theaters. I want to talk about what's been happening in theaters. That's a very dark slide on there. Wow, it's perfect on here. It says demographics. And this is somebody who runs a theater in Belgium came up to me in January and said, could you come and do some work with us to develop a digital strategy, because we just realized that our audience are all going to be dead in 20 years. Literally, younger people are not going to the theater. Older people are. There was a lot of them after the Second World War. They had a lot of babies. So they've had big audiences for a while, but they're all dying. So they've got a problem. And these are big institutions, so they've got a problem. Meanwhile, in the UK, the Arts Council measured that between 2009 and 2011, the theatre that they were funding, which is experimental theatre, had a 10% reduction in audiences, which is massive. Meanwhile, worldwide, 2014 to 2015, worldwide traditional TV watching dropped 15% overall, 33% amongst younger people. And interestingly, and this is the clue as to why, 87% of those people who are still watching traditional TV are doing it with a second or third screen. What they're doing is they're going, I need interactivity, and you're not giving it to me, so I'm going to use my smartphone to make your stupid content interactive. Meanwhile, gamers, there was some research into gamers and people from a whole host of different media, people who consume culture. How much do you spend and how much satisfaction do you have with the money you spend? Gamers are double everybody else. Everything else is struggling. So people who go to the theatre often go more for like social reasons. They're going to meet their friends, have a nice glass of wine. They're generally more affluent people. What they don't do is buy a t-shirt, or like music fans, change their haircut, get a tattoo. They're not passionate cultural consumers in the same way as music and gaming. And so this concept of playful media, which there are now emerging festivals which are using as their title, playful media, is becoming the mainstream. Playful media is really the mainstream. And so somebody like me, I'm still not retiring yet, so I'm going to have to embrace this into the work that I'm doing. So here's a question. What happened to theatre in the last 10 years? As the audiences are dropping, what's happening? So one thing was that theatres realized that they couldn't fill auditoriums with experimental theatre, so they went to Shakespeare and the traditional kind of poppy stuff like stand-up comedy, musicals, the stuff that the older people with all the money go to. Meanwhile, the edgy theatre was put into broom cupboards. and I'm not even joking. There was a report done in the UK a few years ago that said that in order to keep embracing and funding experimental theatre, we're going to have to open up some of the other spaces in theatres. Broom cupboards, dressing rooms, small spaces, and in these places we can do more experimental stuff, because then we don't have to sell so many tickets. Another way of saying that experimental theatre became a boring cliche which no one wanted to see and got demoted to the broom cupboard. That's pretty much exactly what happened. But out of that, something interesting came along, which was that it meant that punk wasn't dead, because as soon as you don't have to sell tickets, you can do really wild shit. And so a whole kind of new strand of theatre came out. And it's really from about 2009, 2010, there was a small element of theatre that was getting exciting again. And you could say, you know, there were a few festivals that called it one-on-one. So one performer, one audience member, because you both fit in a broom cupboard, basically. And you can sit across from each other and you can have a performance. But obviously, it demanded something different. How am I going to sit in front of somebody and perform to them without it being horrendously painful? So another thing about one-on-one theatre, one of the great things that happened was that you could fit it in a suitcase, and it meant that touring was really cheap. Instead of touring with 12 cast members, it's just me in a suitcase or 2 suitcases. What that means is that last year I did a 14-nation world tour of my one-on-one stuff, which, by the way, is it's entirely VR based. So it's using technology, it's using virtual reality. Actually, I made my first virtual reality piece in 2010. In 2011, it was in the Tate Modern, and that did a big bunch of touring as well. So what one-on-one theatre strategy has been able to do is help theatre to adapt to more contemporary audiences. And it's done that by allowing for greater amounts of interactivity. The performance style has moved away from this performative sort of theatre style acting, which I hate, to more kind of filmic, more cinematic acting style, more naturalistic and realistic performance style. It's become more non-linear, moving across multiple platforms. So we make a piece that's in the broom cupboard, but when you come out, we know you're going to go online, so we've made stuff online for you or whatever like that. The storytelling style has had to change. Touring work, the models for touring, like I just said, has changed. And we're using a lot more technology and moving away from being a scene where it's the same 50 people that come to see every show to being an art form, which means that it's actually going out and meeting new audiences all the time. So things became exciting. And it's all about embracing this term again, playful media. So there are festivals which are now taking theatre that would never have done before. And they may not even realize that it's theatre, which is really funny. So MutekMX is an electronic music festival, but which is run in Montreal, Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, Tokyo, Barcelona. And my work, which is, I haven't told them it's theatre, but it is, has been at their festivals. Same goes for a Maze Festival in Berlin, took the Cube, one of my pieces I'm going to describe to you. So it's an interesting moment in theatre where actually I don't use that word very often, I don't really like it, and I'm sort of throwing it away, but I'm acknowledging to you, as long as you don't tell anybody else out there, that it's kind of theatre, okay? So we have this strange situation where we have this very, very, very big scene called gaming, which we know there's a fringe element of it which is more moving into the art space, more performative, more installation-based. Some of it is journalistic or documentary-based, but it's a small element of it, but it's a big scene, so it's substantial. Meanwhile, in the art scene, which is much smaller, we have this fringe element like me, which are using gaming technology and gameplay ideas about telling stories. And so in this little place here is something interesting happening. And into the middle of all of this came virtual reality, and I couldn't resist putting Pong in the background. And the reason is because it's sort of a meta-reference to about 15 other presentations I've given about VR as a new medium. Virtual reality arrives as a new medium, but what human beings do with a new medium, whether it be film or whatever, is they make the old medium first, because they have no handle on what to do with this new stuff. So what we're seeing is a lot of VR games that are really like the games from before, and gradually it's evolving and moving away into something new. There's a question. We've had these shows in broom cupboards, but you can't survive on broom cupboard fees forever because it's small amounts of money always. So the question is how to scale this one-on-one theatre strategy where you'll have very intimate, playful interactions with audience members. How do we scale it up so it's 1,500 people or 2,000 people or 100,000 people or whatever? And that's the work that Circus 69 has been doing in the last 2 years. So the body of my talk is really about this, what's coming up next. So this show is called Whilst the Rest Were Sleeping, and it combines a lot of stuff. If you go to my website, you'll see that there are 5 shows listed, and they're all part of this bigger story. As I've been developing the show over the last 2.5, 3 years, each individual element has been touring on its own as solo works. And so, for example, today, after I finish here, I'm going to Bologna, and I'm doing 2 of these shows. Last year they had 2 of the other ones, and so the audiences there are in a very long-form way, gradually picking up the wider story. But from October they'll be playing in Mexico City as one great big body of work. This is the National Photography Museum in Mexico City, which is where they're going to be playing. It's a building with lots of different spaces, and this show will be taking up a lot of this building. And it is essentially a large-scale promenade piece, so people walk around. What they'll find is 17 virtual reality headsets hidden in different places around the room. They'll have an Android or an iOS app on their phone, which is a collection. It's like a scavenger hunt, but it's augmented reality-based. They will find that there is a live electronic music performance with visuals, and those visuals have augmented reality hidden in the projections as well. And the first one of these projections is really dark, isn't it? Can we sort I think it's the contrast. This is the first part of the show that I made. It's called The Cube. And it follows a story about how in 1959 in America, there was a mass disappearance. It wasn't so mass, there was 9 people went missing. But the details of this case are really strange. It's a story I heard about when I was 13. I read it in a magazine called Mysteries of the World that my grandfather gave me. What happened in 1959 was that a teacher and 8 school kids went on a school trip one morning from a small town called Albion in Idaho, and at the end of the day they didn't come back. And they never came back, and they were never found. And the only things that were found were 8 handwritten letters, each one written by one of the young people. And these letters were found on a table in a black cube-shaped wooden shack in the Great Basin Desert, about 10 miles into the Great Basin Desert. So a very strange story, all of which is bullshit, but I don't tell the audience that. The point is they come thinking it's real, and so it's much more compelling for them. And in a way, the subtext of this whole piece of work I'm describing is about what's real and what's not real. It's the idea of making a virtual reality for people which isn't just in the headset but outside of it. And so, in a way, what I'm talking about is public relations, propaganda, marketing, and all of the persuasive voices that we have in society.
This is the story of something very strange that happened in 1959 in America.
The atmosphere from the off was very eerie.
Really scary. And even doing something virtually, it feels spooky. And also, I suppose, because I know it is a true story.
It was so weird. One of the strangest things I've ever done.
It was proper immersive.
You want to know more and you want an answer.
That was insane.
I know, it's kind of scared to know more, but also intrigued as well. It kind of made me feel more like I was part of the story.
Like, it's quite dreamlike.
I felt immersed in it.
I want to know more about the story, but I want to tell other people the story.
Yeah, and I want to go research this now because it's so strange.
You're going to want to know more.
if this letter is going to tell me more about, but I'm super intrigued.
So you get the feel of it. It's kind of freaky. And people use their hands in the show. They have to pick things up and reach for them. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. There are other effects that aren't just the eyes and ears, so when they go outside, they feel the wind blowing on their face and so on and so forth. Which I'm calling for myself, I'm calling them kinesthetic effects, body effects. So I'm trying in all of these pieces always to incorporate other effects to make it more immersive. The second to the 9th of the VR installations are based on a story, a parallel story of a guy who was an author in the 1960s and 70s. This is true. In the 1960s and 70s, there was an author called Manfred Berry who, at the age of 3, stopped talking. He was autistic. There's a phenomena with some people who are autistic that they stop talking. They begin learning to talk and then they suddenly stop, and he was one of those people. And as he was growing up, he wrote letters to his imaginary friend. And we've taken 8 of those letters and we've turned them into VR installations. Now again, all of that is bullshit, but I had you believing me for a while. And that's kind of the point I'm going to keep coming back to, is that the audience are meant to believe these things and follow up like they're a real story. Manfred is also mentioned in the Cube, so you can see there's a crossover. And in this one, I realized that with VR, one of the things we were doing was that we were putting loads of interactions in there. People have to reach out with their hands, you know, and take decisions and so on. Well, real life isn't like that. If you ask a psychologist, only about 5% of our cognitive activity is conscious. So I decided to go the other way and put no interactions, no conscious interactions in at all. The audience is changing what's happening through raycasting in the games engine, but they don't know they're doing it. They're effectively on a ride, but each of their rides will be a little bit different. So obviously the guy wasn't talking, so there's no speaking in this one. It's all audio based, so it's actually 7.1 surround audio, which sometimes is with real speakers and very loud, and the audience is in the center of the room like you saw there, and sometimes is in 7.1 headphones, gaming headphones. So 8 of the headsets that are in this space will be 8 chapters of that particular one. Finally, in terms of the VR, there's Slave to Mortal Rage, and this is, again, from the life of Manny Berry, who, as I told you, is real. And this is the moment of his death. You're not told that, but that's what it is. Don't tell anybody else. You find yourself in his apartment, the apartment where he writes his novels, and it's room-scale VR, so you can explore, and you can use your hands, and you can open drawers, and you find bits of manuscripts, and you find an unfinished manuscript. You find just the first few lines of it. And what you find around the apartment are scraps of notes, of other notes from this unfinished book. You find all of the books that you've just seen in VR lying around on bookshelves. And at a certain point, which they don't know is the point that he dies, everything goes into zero gravity, and the city around you, for example, starts floating off. Now, in this one, there's a broken window as an example of a kinesthetic effect. When you walk up to look out the window, you feel the wind blowing on your face like that.
When I have seen by times fell and interlaced, the rich proud cost of outworn buried age, when sometime lofty towers I see down raised, and brass eternal, slave to mortal rage.
It's probably enough of that. So, You have an unfinished manuscript. You have a series of books which you've seen in VR, and you've now seen that they're on a bookshelf, and you see that you've been in the apartment where the writer has been working on them. And then you have a live electronic music performance, which I'm doing tomorrow in Bologna. It's a half an hour performance, electronic music with a narration that comes over the top, and it's a female voice talking about how she's got to kill somebody. And I'm not going to tell you how it fits in with the rest of the story, because you might see it sometime. It's very weird, very spooky, and it ties in, meshes in with the rest of the story, but still it leaves a big puzzle. How does it all fit together? And so you have your iOS Android app, which you go around the museum. There's a gallery of 8 images, which are from the notebook of Manny Berry, drawings that he's done. Each of them show a person in the distance watching you. And also, every time you come out of a VR installation, there's something on a plinth that you scan, and when you scan it, you get extra stuff in the AR. Now, the important thing with the AR stuff is that I've intended it so that each augmented reality experience is explorable. You can spend 5 minutes in there finding clues, things pinned to trees. They're 3D shapes. One of them is his grave, so you can go up and find out what year he died, and then you can go online and search it. And so the idea is that, yes, you go around collecting these AR things, but they're not just you put it up and there's a replacement image. They are explorable 3D worlds that you can get right into. As I've said, I'm using kinesthetic effects throughout, so you have to use your real hands. You have to use hand controllers in one of them, but mostly you're using your real hands. You get fans and vibrations and smells and other things coming through. But the most important thing about this, and I mentioned at the beginning that I'm listed as a transmedia artist, and this is where it really comes into play, that the live show is the bit they see. There's a massive amount of it which they're not told about. They're never ever told to go online. But we know that 63% of them will, because we've tested it again and again. It's roughly around 60% go online immediately after coming out. Now what we've done is created a lot of fake Wikipedia pages, websites for museums, and a whole host of other online content, including a secret society that keeps coming up in the story. And when you go to that website, there's a password. You should be able to work it out from the game, but if you don't, there have been hacks on that website a number of times where people have hacked their way in. Which is one of the things about making this kind of work, is you don't really know what the audience experience is, because when they go home, they're still engaging online. You can see the hits on the websites, but what you don't know is how they were feeling and so on. The fact that they were hacking their way into the websites, the fact that they were emailing the director of the museum, which they didn't know was me in my hotel room, pretending to be his wife saying he was out, the fact that people offer to pay money to get more information, and so on and so forth, means that I know that it's I gave a presentation about this in London to the London Film Board and some people, and one of them, I think he was criticizing me, but he said, it seems to me what you're trying to do is make crack in story form, which is kind of, it is. It's making it playful, it's making so you have a role, and making it interactive, and making it engaging in a way that film could never be, and theatre could never be in the old style format. So it's a story, I guess, which has been exploded and thrown into bits, VR installations. It's strewn all over this venue, and it's strewn all over the internet, and you have to find it. So it's a puzzle. And that's how you find me. circa69.co.uk. And thank you.